Good day and welcome. Today, we're continuing our series on ancient Egypt. In this episode, we will discuss more about the way of life, the social structure in ancient Egypt. Question: what do you think was the most important job in ancient Egypt? Share your answer in the comments below. Stick around until the end for some thought-provoking questions to test your understanding. Challenge yourself and see how well you've grasped the material. It's a fantastic way to boost your confidence. Please don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our weekly uploads. For more on ancient Egypt, be sure to check out the links in the description and the playlists. Let's get started. Earlier we saw that Egyptians lived in a narrow band of farmland next to the Nile. Beyond this area, east and west of the Nile, were deserts. There were mountains to the south. The deserts and the mountains kept Egypt safe from attack. The farmers who settled next to the Nile River produced enough food for everyone because the land was so fertile. People who did not farm made new tools, wove clothes, built temples and houses, traded food and goods with one another, and learnt how to read, write, and do maths. The ancient Egyptians invented paper, the sail, the 365-day calendar, fractions, the ox-drawn plough, legal contracts, black ink, and much, much more. Their knowledge of medicine, astronomy, and building was extremely vast. Today, we will learn more about life in ancient Egypt. The Egyptians grew a grain called barley, which they used to make bread and beer. They also grew many fruits and vegetables, like melons, onions, pomegranates, cabbages, leeks, beans, and grapes. They made wine from the grapes. The Egyptians also grew a plant called flax. They spun the flax into linen, which they used to make clothes, bedding, and the material they used to wrap up the bodies of the dead. Papyrus was a type of reed that grew wild along the banks of the Nile River. The ancient Egyptians used papyrus to make a type of paper. In ancient Egypt, the year was divided into 3 distinct seasons, each playing a crucial role in the agricultural cycle that sustained the civilization. Akhet was the flooding season, lasting from July to October. During Akhet, the Nile River would overflow its banks, flooding the surrounding land. This annual flood was essential as it deposited rich, fertile soil onto the fields, making the ground ready for planting once the waters receded. Peret followed Akhet, lasting from November to February. This was the planting season when the fields, now enriched with nutrient-rich soil, were ready for sowing crops. The ancient Egyptians took advantage of the moist soil left behind by the floods to plant their crops, ensuring that they would have a bountiful harvest. Shimu was the harvesting season, which took place from March to June. During Shimu, the crops that had grown during Peret were ready to be gathered. This was a busy time for the Egyptians as they collected the fruits of their labor, ensuring they had enough food to last until the next harvest. These 3 seasons were central to life in ancient Egypt, dictating the rhythm of the agricultural year and the activities of the people. The reliance on the Nile's flooding and the careful timing of planting and harvesting were crucial for the survival and prosperity of the civilization. Let's move on and talk about the social structure in ancient Egypt. There was a class system in Egypt. There was a very strict social system. There were different levels within Egyptian society, starting from the lowest level, which were slaves, and ending at the highest level, the pharaoh. The pharaoh was the richest and most powerful person in the land. They owned all the land and had many assistants. The people believed that the pharaoh was like a god and that every person and everything belonged to them. They were seen as the only person on earth who could communicate directly with the gods. In ancient Egypt, some people were rich and powerful, but most people were poor and had to work hard. The pyramid on the left shows how people used to fit into Egyptian society. The people near the top were the richest and most powerful, while the people at the bottom were the poorest. Rich and poor people in ancient Egypt lived very different lives. Rich people ate well, wore fine clothes and lived in big houses. They had time to play games. Their children went to school. Poor people lived in small houses, which were built close together. The poorest people were slaves, who were usually captured in war by the Egyptian soldiers. In ancient Egypt, each person had a specific role that contributed to the functioning of society. The pharaoh ruled over Egypt, making important decisions and leading the nation. The pharaoh was at the very top of the ancient Egyptian social system. He or she had all power in Egypt. Many pharaohs were worshipped as gods. The pharaoh was advised by the vizier or advisor, who provided counsel and helped guide the pharaoh's choices. Priests, doctors, and engineers were very important and highly respected. Priests played a vital role in religious life, praying to the gods and performing sacred rituals. Priests were religious leaders, doctors healed people and worked on new medicines. The engineers designed buildings, roads, and machines. Scribes were educated individuals who read, wrote, and kept important records, preserving the knowledge and history of Egypt. Not everyone in ancient Egypt could read and write. Writing was considered a skilled job. A scribe is a skilled writer. It is because of the work of the scribes that we know so much about ancient Egypt today. Administrators helped the pharaoh run Egypt. The administrators went up and down the Nile by boat, measuring land and collecting taxes for the pharaoh. Soldiers in the army protected the nation by keeping Egypt safe from enemy attacks. Craftsmen and artists created everyday items such as pots, clothes, jewelry, shoes, statues, paintings, masks. They used their skills to produce goods for the community. Artists and craftsmen were above the farmers. They painted the houses of the rich, made their furniture, and did the interior decorations. Meanwhile, farmers and workers worked the land, grew crops, and performed various tasks such as housework, building homes and temples, and working in gardens, all of which were essential to sustaining life in ancient Egypt. Most of the people in ancient Egypt were farmers who worked hard to provide food and other products to the people of Egypt. Farmers did not own their land, farms were owned by the nobility. Farmers had to pay taxes to the pharaoh in the form of crops or animals according to the size of their farm. Slaves were at the very bottom of the hierarchy. Slaves were captured from the lands around Egypt, or poor Egyptians sold members of their families into slavery. It is thought that slaves built the ancient pyramids of Giza. We have come to the end of today's lesson. But before we go, please try to answer the following questions before the answers appear. You can pause the video as needed. This is an important section to help you consolidate what you've learned. In the next video, we'll explore beliefs and religion in ancient Egypt, including their views on death, the processes of embalming and mummification, and the role of pharaohs. Be sure to check out the link in the description for this and more. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our weekly uploads. Thank you for watching, and take care.